Man, I tell you what, I got to calm down for a minute. I tell you, you come to a church service like this and you're not feeling something, you're dead inside. I'm telling you, I'm going to have to move this thing. I'm going to knock it over. Steve, man, that was powerful. Those baptisms, seeing men and women dedicate their lives to Christ. I've been feeling for a couple weeks that there's somebody coming here, and it was confirmed to me last week, and I don't know who it is. But God gave it to me that there's somebody coming here, and you've been kind of dragging yourself in. You've been getting up on Sunday morning, and I'm not going to go today, and then something calls you in, something's pulling you in. And that person, I don't think you know God. And I'm going to preach today, and I'm going to give a word today, but I want to tell you something. While I'm doing that, I want you to be praying about God wants you to do. Because it's like Isaac said, why am I not in this water? Why am I not in this water yet? And this lady here, she said, I come with such sadness and I leave with joy. We all need to be leaving with joy. The joy that Christ gives. Man, that's powerful. We need a sovereign God. Good works are not enough. They're not enough. You can be a good person your whole life. We need a sovereign God. Morality alone will not get it. If we don't have Him, we've got nothing. Man. Jeremiah 29:11 through 13. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. That's what God wants to do. He wants to give you hope and a future. I bet there's people in here right now that have plans that aren't working out. Who wants to raise their hand on that? Who's got plans that aren't working out? We all do, right? Maybe little, maybe big. But God's plan is perfect. And God's timing is perfect. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. God, give me this, and somebody in here, I just hope it blesses you. Once there were 3 trees on a hill in the woods. They were discussing their hopes and dreams when the first tree said, someday I hope to be a treasure chest. I could be filled with gold and silver and precious gems. I could be decorated with intricate carving, and everyone would see the beauty that is inside of me. The second tree said, someday I will be a mighty ship. I will take kings and queens across the waters and to every corner of the world. Everyone will feel safe in me because of the strength of my hull. Finally, the third tree said, I want to grow to be the tallest and the straightest tree in the forest. People will see me on top of the hill, and they'll look up to my branches, and they'll think of the heavens, and they'll think of God and how close to Him I am reaching. I will be the greatest tree of all time, and people will always remember me. After a few years of praying and growing that their dreams would come true, a group of woodsmen came along the 3 trees. At the first tree, they looked at it and they said, this looks like a strong tree. I think we could sell this to a carpenter. And he started to cut it down. The tree was happy. He was excited because he knew the carpenter would turn him into a treasure chest. At the second tree, they said, this looks like a strong tree. I think I could sell it to a shipyard. The tree was so overjoyed. He was on his way to becoming that mighty ship. When the woodsman came upon the third tree, he was frightened. Because he knew if they cut him down, he would never grow to be the tallest tree. His dreams wouldn't come true. They looked at it and they said, I don't see anything special in this tree. Let's cut it down. And they took it. When the first tree arrived at the carpenter's, he was made into a feed box for animals. He was placed in a barn and he was filled with hay. This is not at all what he'd prayed for. The second tree was cut down and made into a small fishing boat. His dreams of being a mighty ship and carrying kings had come to an end. The third tree was cut into large pieces and left alone in the dark. Years went by and the trees forgot about their dreams. Then one day a man and a woman came to the barn. She gave birth, and they placed the baby in the hay in the feed box that was made from the first tree. The man wished he could have made a crib for the baby, but a manger would have to do. The tree could feel the importance of this event, and he knew that he had held the greatest treasure of all time. Years later, a group of men got into the small fishing boat made from the second tree. One of them was tired and he went to sleep. While they were out on the water, a great storm arose, and the tree didn't think it was strong enough to keep the men safe. The men woke the sleeping man, and he stood and he said, "Peace," and the storm stopped. At this time, the tree knew that it had carried the King of Kings. Finally, someone came for the third tree. People mocked the man who was carrying it. When they came to a stop, the man was nailed to the tree, and he was raised in the air to die at the top of a hill. When Sunday came, the tree came to realize that it was strong enough to stand at the top of the hill, and it was as close to God as possible because Jesus Christ had been crucified on it. You see, God's plan was different than our plan. It seems like we're being cut down, and you say, "Why, God? Why am I going through this? Why are you cutting me down? My dreams aren't going to come true." That tree wanted everybody to remember it, and I'm going to tell you something. I doubt there's a more famous tree. Everybody remembers it. We have it on stage. We wear it around our necks. Have the tattoos. God is so good. Matthew 5:45. He causes the sun to rise on evil and the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Let me say that again. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. We all have trials. Accepting Christ, being baptized, none of that's going to make your life any easier. This is a hard world. When you were talking about immigrating into the United States, it breaks my heart that they treated you the way they did. This country was built on immigrants. It wasn't too many hundreds of years ago that my family came in from Germany. My wife's from France. This country was given to us by God for His promise. We need to get up and we need to start proclaiming His name out there. There's the mission field. I want to go out there and tell somebody about God. I want to go out there and tell somebody about Jesus. I want to go out there and I want to tell them what He did for me and what He can do for you. We all have hopes and dreams. They just don't go like we plan sometimes. But God has a perfect plan for your life. And I'm going to tell you something. One day, you will get to heaven, and all of the question marks in this life will be straightened into exclamation points. We'll know why. We'll know why death. We'll know why disease. We'll know why this went that way and that went that way. We'll know why that friend doesn't talk to you anymore. We'll know why that guy came into your life. We'll know why. Every question mark will be straightened into an exclamation point. He's all-knowing, and He has a plan. Psalms 139:13. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows them very well. God has a plan. You have a purpose in that plan. Say that with me. I have a purpose in God's plan. I want you to mean it this time. I have a purpose in God's plan. Now you get a hold of that and you believe it and you don't let that go. How many of you have felt like a prayer wasn't answered? right? I've questioned it. Did it shake in your faith? Did it harden your hearts? I want to tell you, we don't focus on the good in this country. I don't know if we focus, it's just people. You can do amazing things. You could be the greatest baseball player, okay, of all time. You blow the big game, what are they going to remember for the rest of your life? Well, you missed that catch. Negative always outweighs the positive, and we've got to change that. Instead of focusing on the times your prayers weren't answered, let's talk about the times they were. Let's talk about the times that God was good enough to do something good in my life when I didn't deserve it. When you didn't deserve it. Let's talk about that stuff. I'm going to tell you about my experience with answered prayers today. I don't think anybody in my family knows this. When I was a little boy, I was very, very close with my grandma and my grandpa. And I used to pray at night that I would have my grandparents until I was 16. I remember that clearly. God just given me till 16. Now, at the time, I didn't realize they were like in their 50s and they were really young. At 6, at 8 or 9, I thought they were ancient. Now I look back and I think, man. But I prayed for that. I lost my grandfather at 34. He gave me more than double what I asked him to. He does what he asks us to do. In Matthew 5:41, if anyone, this is Jesus, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. That's hard to do. Give to the one who asks, and do not turn away from the one that wants to borrow. When my grandfather passed, I was praying with him. And I held on to him and I asked God, I begged for God. I said, God, give me something. Give me something to know that he made it. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Part of that was selfish, because if he wasn't going, I didn't have a prayer. So I hung on to him and I said, God, give me something. And so as he passed, we were all surrounded him. Grandpa had this clock. I bought this clock for him like 10 years before that. He used to build clocks when he lived in England when he was in the service. And so he didn't have a real weighted and chained clock that drove off of it. It really worked off of the weights and gravity. And anyway, I got this thing for him. It saved up, got it for him for Christmas like a long time ago. And that same Christmas, my aunt knew that he wanted a clock. So she bought him a big grandfather clock that was all digital. And so he'd set the digital one up in one corner and he had this weights and chains. And man, he was so he wanted to make sure that those two clocks would ring together. It drove him nuts. And so the digital one never missed a beat. But the old weight and chains one, that thing, he would have to, raise the weights, wind it, check it all the time. And if they were not ringing perfectly in chime with each other when it struck the hour, he was adjusting something on one of them. That clock was his favorite clock. He loved that clock. He'd tell everybody about that clock. When I'd come over, 10 years later, would thank me for that clock. He just loved that clock. The night before he passed, the clocks were chiming out of rhythm. And one of the few things he did that night, which he didn't do much, was we made sure that clock, get them back in adjustment. So we wound it, got everything. Okay, everybody was good. When he passed at 2:52, I wasn't paying attention. I was praying for something. We laid him to rest there, and I walked into the kitchen, and 3 o'clock came. The digital clock was chiming. The weights and chains driven clock was not. And I walked back in and I thought to myself, gravity seems to be working. why is this clock not chiming? It must have got out of sync again. I went in there, and the clock had locked up at 2:52. When he passed, that clock locked up. God give me that to say he made it. On his way out, he grabbed a hold of that clock, and he stopped the little pendulum. And that's exactly something that he would have done anyway. And that thing just sat there, and it was locked up. I mean, just in amazement. It blew my mind. And I mean, if you experience something like that, then you can't deny that there's something out there other than what we see here. We see what we see. But if you could see spiritually, if you could see what God sees, the heart of people, the wickedness of the heart of people, the angels, the demons, the spiritual warfare that's going on. The guy that was hanging on to Steve Kinnaman's coat, that he didn't want him in that water. I didn't see it, but I know it's there. You got to drag yourself in sometimes. If we could see what God sees. So he gave me what I asked for, and then he walked 2 miles with me. We put Grandpa in the hearse, and my little Clara, little daughter, she was barely 2, I don't know. And she'd been at daycare all day because we knew that it was going to be a pretty rough day just from the way things were looking. And Rachel said, there's no sense in her being around this and seeing all this. And, she loved Grandpa. She likes to sit on his lap and draw pictures. And she's very close with him. She still talks about him. And she was 2. And so 4 o'clock was when the daycare closed. And it was like 3:50. And I looked at my phone and I'm like, oh, great. We forgot our daughter. Well, I mean, with everything going on, but we forgot our daughter. So Rachel says, we got to go get her. So she was tied up. So I drove out to Lake Lane College to get her from the daycare. It's a Christian daycare. And I got her in the car. And we got driving down Route 45. And I asked her. Something told me to ask her. I said, Clara, did you see Grandpa today? And she says, yeah, Daddy, I saw Grandpa today. And I said, you did? And she said, yeah. I said, he was riding on a white horse. A white horsey, she said. I said, he was? She said, yeah, and he's on a farm. He's on a farm? And he had a rooster, she said. I said, well, he would be messing with a rooster. He always wanted a farm. And so that really struck me as odd, and, he's on his horsey, and I thought, well, that was nice, and then we drove a little further, and she said, out of the blue, she said, Jesus is happy. You see, God had waited for him. And so when I got back to the house and gathered up our things, poor Grandma, and so I said, here's Clara. I said, you won't believe what she told me. I said, we were driving back here, and she told me she saw Grandpa on a white horse. And I'm not kidding you, Grandma turned 3 shades of white I'd never seen before. And she said, for days, he wanted the blinds open next to his chair. He would lay in that chair, and she said he would not let me close the blinds. And I said, Cecil, why won't you let me close the blinds? That sun is coming in. He says, the horse. Look at that horse out there, that white horse standing out here. Look at it. Of course, he had cancer. So she thought, and he was hallucinating. Between the meds and the cancer, she didn't tell anybody about that. He was waiting for his ride home. And he confirmed it through a 2-year-old. I'm going to tell you something. When you experience something like that, and you're not moved, and you're not touched, and you don't realize there's something else out there, brother or sister, you're dead inside. You're spiritually dead inside. You're just living in this body, waiting to be ate by worms. He didn't give me 1 mile. He gave me 2 miles. And he'll give you 2 miles. Now I'm going to tell you some other times about my prayers that didn't get answered. My first marriage. Nice lady. We still talk. Everything's good. We never had kids together. But she was an atheist. And she wasn't coming back around. It was one of them, you're just not going to bring her back. I don't know. I still pray for her. I laid in bed night after night after night after night, and I pleaded with God, fix this. You can fix this. You can fix anything. Get a hold of her. Get a hold of me. Fix this. Nothing. And then the years went by, and he introduced me to my wife now. And what I have is so much greater than what I did have. And what I have as a relationship with God is so much greater than what I did have. See, even in his silence, he answered that prayer. Now I'm going to tell you, it's hard when God's silence. I long to see God work. I do. I long to see him work. And I mourn him when he's silent, and he does that to me sometimes. I don't know if he does that to you guys. He does that to me. Sometimes he just won't talk to me. And I just mourn him in a way. I'm like, come on, God. Tell me what to do. Here's the thing. God is never late. Here's the other thing. He's never early. He's on time. He's on time. You see, Lazarus' family, if you don't know the story of Lazarus, he died. He was sick. He was sick and he died. And they were sending messengers out, and they were like, come on, Jesus, good old Lazarus. Come on over here and just touch him. Heal him. Fix this. Fix it. Jesus rolls in 4 days late. 4 days dead. And they say, come on, God. Man, you're 4 days late. Now, I'm going to tell you something. God will put you in a position where only he can take credit for fixing it. Right? Lazarus gets better on his own. God shows up 4 days later. We got a different story. 4 days late. 4 days dead. He says, come on out of your tomb, Lazarus. Shake off your grave clothes. Church, I want to tell you something today. Shake off your grave clothes. Shake them off. Why do we even wear them? They reek. They reek of your filth and your just a horrible sight we are to God. I'm telling you. You talk about Isaac, you talk about not feeling worthy, brother. And Steve and some of you, I've been there. I am there. I never feel worthy. I don't feel worthy to take this stage. I don't feel worthy for the blessings God has given me. I don't feel worthy for the children I have. I don't feel worthy for the wife I have. I don't feel worthy that God even talks to me or considers me. But he does. I think that's a healthy place to be. I think that's a healthy place to be. For years I've struggled with that. And finally God said, hey, if you had it all figured out, you wouldn't need me. Right? If you had it all together, you wouldn't need me. This world does not know how to handle a man or a woman of God. This country doesn't know what to do with it. A true Christian, this country has no idea what to do with it. Our politicians don't know what to do with them. Our schools don't know what to do with them. The senators don't know what to do with them. I'll tell you, some of these pastors in these churches today don't know what to do with them. That's what I want to tell you. They don't know how to handle a man of God. You get a hold of that Bible and it gets a hold of you and you can't let go and it's growing on you. They don't know what to do. We need to quit talking about whether or not Jesus died on the cross. It's historical fact a man named Jesus died on a cross. But I want to tell you something. He was so much man, he wasn't God at all. He was so much God, he wasn't man at all. And we need to start talking about not if he died on the cross, but why he did it. Why did he do it? He did it so you and so me and so everybody that will ever be born before or after you and me doesn't have to die the death we deserve. A lot of people fear death. I used to fear death. I'm going to tell you something else. This world doesn't know what to do with a man that doesn't fear death. Look at what Lazarus went through. Let's talk about Lazarus for a minute. Raised from the dead, he'd already been there. He'd been there once. What do you do with a guy like that? How are you going to scare that guy? We're going to kill you. Yeah, that didn't work out. You know, we're going to beat you. Yeah, whatever. The man had been there. He came back from it. You can't do something with a man that's already been there. You can't do something with a man that's got a hold of it. And I'm going to tell you about death in Christ. For those of you that are sitting out there, maybe you're a little scared of death. Let me tell you about death in Christ. A man and his little boy came across a stream. They were going camping. The only way to cross this stream was an old rickety bridge. The little boy was really, really apprehensive. Really, really uncertain. Really, really not comfortable. His dad said, "Come on, son. We're going to cross here." He held on to his dad. He was so scared. They crossed that old rickety bridge. They did their camping. Had a big rain. It got rained out. Dad says, "Well, it's time to head home. It's time to head home." Well, you see that little stream, the rain has a way of making those little streams swell into like a creek or a river. And they came back across it because he knew he had to get home. He knew he had to get to the other side, and the boy was scared to death. He was petrified. And so the dad said, "Let me pick you up." And the dad held that little boy in his arms, and he waded across that stream. And the little boy fell asleep. Later that evening, the little boy wakes up. He's in his bed. He's tucked in. He's safe. He's at home. And ladies and gentlemen, that's death for the Christian right there. We're so scared of it. And then when we get there, God says, "Let me carry you. Let me pick you up. We're going to wade across this together. And you're going to fall asleep in my arms. And when you wake up, brother, you're going to be home." Sister, you're going to be home, safe in your bed. That's death for the Christian. We're all headed home. Some of us take a little longer trip. Grandpa took an 81-year trip. I've got a buddy in the ground that took less than 25. I don't know why. But again, I will tell you that when we get to heaven, God will take that question mark, straighten it into an exclamation point. That's why you took him at 25, God. I get it. That's why you give him till 81. Maybe he needed till 81 to get right. I don't know. God willing, I'll live to 81. I hope I'm as cantankerous as he was. You guys won't know what to do with me. If Brad and I keep going the way we're going, we're going to be so grumpy and unbearable, it'll just be me and him preaching to each other in here. Sorry, brother. 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. "Therefore, do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are being wasted away, inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us a glory that far outweighs them all." Our light and moment. See, that's the way God looks at this life, because he's eternal and he's omnipresent, and he can see everything. Anything you're going through, something this big, it's a light and momentary trouble. Because 100 years, if you live that long in God's eyes, is but a second. What is seen, well, we do not focus on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, what is unseen is eternal. Come on, Brad. You ever have one of them chocolate bunnies? Easter time? You know, it lies in this basket surrounded by grass, right? And you pick it up. And when I was little, man, my eyes would get big. There's this giant hunk of chocolate. And you bite into one of the ears, and it's sweet and it's good, and the taste hits you, and then it fades really quick. And then you look down, and you're like, what happened? And you realize the bunny is hollow, right? That is the life experience of many. You grasp for the things that are seen, possessions, experience, power, pleasure. Then you bite into it and you find nothing. You find hollow. You find empty. The sweet taste fades and you still got nothing. Then you start to realize life's pretty empty and meaningless without God. And then you start to sink into despair. Are you in despair, church? Are you sitting there wondering why you're here? God does not make mistakes. You're not here by mistake. He didn't bring you here Sunday morning. That testimony was not by mistake. Those people that got baptized, even the one that was unplanned, not by mistake. I love that. Why am I not in this water? Is what you need to ask yourselves. So do you know him? Do you know him today? He loves you. And I'm going to tell you, you don't want to spend another Christmas like you spent it last year. You don't want to spend another Christmas feeling the way you felt last year. You don't want to spend another Christmas drunk in a bar. I've been there. You don't want to spend another Christmas alone. You don't have God. You're always alone. You're never alone, with God. You're never alone if you got God. You don't want to spend another Christmas with that empty feeling inside, that longing for something. Why am I getting up on Sunday mornings? Why am I coming in here? Why are you bringing me in here, God? I'll tell you why. Because he wants a relationship with you. He wants to save you. He died on the cross for you. I heard a little thing on the radio this morning. This little boy is a little rancher out in Wyoming. He's like 8 or 9 years old. Oh, he was pitiful. He gets the only Christian radio he can get out there is he gets it on through some internet connection from Dallas, Texas. And he calls in to the radio show that morning. And he says, and he's crying. Oh, it's pitiful. He's crying. And he says, sir, I just want to tell you what God did for me today. And he says, okay, son, this is live radio. And he says, my old cow had a little calf. And he said, that calf was pretty sick, he said. His little accent was cute. And he says, that cow is just so old it didn't have the vitamins and the stuff in its milk. And he said, so the little calf started to wither. He said, and then I'll tell you, finally broke its back. And he said, sir, I woke up this morning and I walked out and I was going to put that calf down. I got to put him down myself, he said. He said, and the whole way to the barn I was asking, why, God? Why this one? It was special to me, God. That calf was, that cow that had it was old. This calf was special to me, God. Why this one? And he said, sir, you know what God said to me? He said, my son was special. My son was special to me. And he had to die so you would have life. And he said, and I realized that nothing on this earth is worth anything without God. That's coming from a little boy from the mouth of babes. I'm going to tell you something. If you can't get a hold of that, I cried on the way to church this morning. I cried. Man, I tell you, I shouldn't even be listening to this stuff.